welcome to this episode of At Home with Holland Home. Our next episode dealing with identifying and protecting ourselves from scams, which has been a very timely topic. If you're reading anything in the news or in your AARP magazine or what have you, this is a really great timely topic for everybody, regardless of who we, our age or place we are in life, can benefit from. So I'm Michael Saliba-Loafman. I'm Director of Sales here at Holland Home. And I am joined here by two awesome experts, Jessie Riley, who is the, the Resident Technology Manager here at Holland Home, my colleague and friend. And also joined, we're really thrilled to have Detective Joe Monger from the Ottawa County Sheriff's Office. He's a 20-year veteran of the Sheriff's Department, and he works with this all the time. So we have two great experts on today's webinar. I'm also joined by the sales team here at Holland Home. You're not seeing their faces, but they are on the webinar. Selena Meister and Patty Alexander here at Bretton Woods, Cindy Price and Amy Thayer at Raybrook. So we're glad to have you join us. We have we're going to cover some topics here. And then at the end, as always, there'll be an opportunity for question and answer. So if you could type your questions into the question and answer box, not the chat, just question and answer, that would be great. So with all those housekeeping things taken care of, let's get started about this very important topic. And what we thought we would do is just to kind of outline, we're going to talk about why scams are on the rise and why older adults are sometimes a big target. We're going to talk about some common scams that maybe have been happening or some new ones that are kind of on the scene. And more importantly, how we can protect ourselves, because the type of scams will change, but the principle of how we can protect ourselves remains constant, regardless if it's this scam or that scam. So welcome, Jessie and Detective. We're again, great to have you both here. So maybe I'll start this first question for you, Detective, about scams. Why do you think scams are on the rise? And why are older adults maybe a special target? And Jessie, if you have something to add after that, feel free to jump in.
Well, I think first of all, scams are on the rise mainly because in today's digital world, and with the advent of social media and access to more people, I think they're easier. And also the internet and the technology provides an avenue of anonymity to be able to perpetrate crime and scams and not be caught. It's becoming more and more difficult. As we go on to really identify a primary perpetrator, a lot of times, there's many levels and layers involved in a particular scam. If you're contacted by somebody off of like a phishing email, that particular individual may not be the person that you're sending money to. Or may not even be the primary perpetrator. They just may be connected to the person who is perpetrating the crime. And I think that goes hand in hand, and the older community is targeted because I feel that they're a little more vulnerable and they're easier to perpetrate on, simply either due to confusion about how technology or social media works, or the ability to drag them in with a phishing email that looks legitimate. And you have many things going on like Social Security, IRS, Medicaid. It's very easy to get those emails dragged.
Yeah. Jessie, do you want to add something?
Sure, yeah. So based on just the statistics, older adults, so individuals 60 plus, are actually 3 times more likely to fall victim to cyber scams than individuals in that like 20 to 59 age range. And yeah, like Deputy Monger said, that they're more trustworthy group. Sometimes they can be isolated. And so then that adds a whole additional element that just creates a lot of struggle. They're easily embarrassed, just an experience with technology. So yeah, they're far more likely to fall victim than sort of the younger counterparts in the population.
Yeah, good. Yeah, and it can be phone, it can be email, social media, text messages. There's all kinds of ways that people can be contacted. Maybe talk a little bit about what are some of these common scams we're seeing now that have been fairly prolific or have been, sadly, have been successful. What are the trends you're seeing? Again, maybe we'll start with the detective on this, Detective Monger. What kind of scams are we seeing?
The primary ones that I've been dealing with lately are the grandchildren scam, which the short version is, a person receives a phone call from who they believe is a grandchild, that they're in trouble, either physically in trouble or in legal trouble in a different country, different state, and they're working with an attorney who, for a sum of money can get them out of that trouble or get their bail reduced, get them out of jail, and they keep them on the phone for several hours. And I've even taken cases where the individual is asked to speak with their grandchild, and they put a person on the phone who they feel sounds like their grandchild, but in reality isn't. And they ended up, they want a large amount of cash. And so they go to the bank and take out $10,000, $20,000 worth of cash. And then someone comes to the house to pick it up, and all of the belief that this will settle their grandchild's issue, only to, then follow up with family to realize that the grandchild was never in trouble to begin with. That's one. The email phishing scams, mainly that an Amazon account has been compromised, or their Medicare, card or account has been compromised. They owe back taxes. Things along those lines, and they end up responding to the links or the phone numbers or within the email, which are automatically directed to the perpetrator, who then, request gift cards or other purchases to be made to settle the issue. And when in reality, nothing was ever wrong with their account. And then they end up finding out later that it was all a scam. And those are primary ones that we've been dealing with lately. There's several others, but those are the primary ones that I've had.
Yeah, Jessie?
Yeah, I would say that, the phishing is a huge one that we see, but we've also seen just a significant increase in the tech support scams that are coming around. And now that, in the past couple of years, we've seen just an explosion in older adults using more technology, and typically individuals 60 plus now have at least 2 devices. And so sometimes with that, they're new users, and all of a sudden they get a pop-up that says, we've realized something is, vulnerable on your device. You need to click this link and we'll fix it for you. Oftentimes they'll pose as Microsoft or Apple. We've even had situations where these pop-ups will show up, Apple pop-ups will show up on Microsoft computers, and people they don't know, but all they know is that they probably just invested a lot of money into this device, and now something's saying there's something wrong, there's a virus on your computer, and we can help fix it. And then that starts just a really hard process where those individuals will download software onto the computer, attach themselves to your personal information. So we've seen quite a significant increase in those, even in the past 2-3 months, where those are taking place, in addition to just like the daily phishing scams that are going on.
Go ahead, Detective.
Yeah, a lot of phishing emails, especially with the downloaded software, seems to be a big issue. Mm-hmm. And Facebook as well. A lot of the contacts on Facebook that are, causing issues.
Definitely.
Yeah. And Jessie, when we talked on Monday, you touched a little bit about how much the timing, the time of year can really make a difference in some of those things. Could you elaborate on that a little bit?
Sure. So, as Detective Monger said, these scammers are becoming more and more sophisticated over time. And so they also like to prey on kind of vulnerable situations. So we see scams revolving around certain topics like Medicare open enrollment. That'll start to ramp up coming this fall, because everybody's going to be looking at, what Medicare Part D do I need to enroll in? So then come tax time, then there's a heightened IRS scam issue. But there was also, if we look back to 2020 when there was COVID-19 stimulus money going out, that was a huge phishing scam piece where people were receiving information about, if you want to receive your stimulus money, this is, you need to click this link, contact us in order to receive this, or you have a payment waiting for you. So we see them kind of prey on these vulnerable times and situations, which again, it's just really unfortunate, specifically for, the 60+ group.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the latest thing has been kind of these text messages where somebody says, hey, I'm going to be late to our golf outing or something. And you reply back, wrong number. Oh, you seem nice, and then this dialogue starts where it's a total scam. It's a number that's not in your phone. And then and then they want to move that conversation off to a different platform. So, I mean, these perpetrators, to use the detective's word, these perpetrators are certainly resourceful. So those scams and everything, those things, their ploys will change, but what are things, how can all of us protect ourselves, regardless of which scam it is? I mean, there's a lot of things that we can protect ourselves. So maybe start with you, Jessie, about some things we might do, because there's a lot of steps we can take to be protective.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's a lot of steps people can take, and it doesn't take a lot. I mean, you don't have to seek out a professional to sit down with. For a lot of people, there are things that, after this webinar, you could go sit down and kind of start making sure your information is sort of shored up. So a couple of things that we recommend is just make sure your operating systems are up to date. So whether you're on, specifically related to like smartphones, tablets, computers, just make sure that you're operating on the latest operating system version that has built-in security mechanisms. When those get outdated, you kind of open yourself up to potential issues there. Make sure that your apps are updated, that if you have, security software on your device, make sure that's updated as well. Passwords are a huge thing that we talk about with residents at Holland Home. So making sure those are strong passwords. And it can be challenging because it seems like everything requires a password these days. But one thing is make sure that you don't use the same password for every account that you log into. Because if somebody gains access to your device and they see a trend that all of a sudden they use the word password as your password and they can get into everything, then you've got a real issue. So oftentimes we'll suggest, make sure that it's at least 12 characters long. Use uppercase, lowercase letters, numbers, symbols. Oftentimes what I'll suggest is use kind of like a passphrase. Don't use your name or your address, but maybe use the first initial of every street that you've lived on and then the year your first grandchild was born. Information that and could easily kind of recall, but that maybe would be more challenging for somebody trying to hack into your accounts to be able to come up with. Oftentimes people will use a password management system. There's lots out there. And we've also seen people starting to use, and more websites starting to use, multi-factor authentication. And that's just a situation. It's kind of this equation of something which is your password, and then something that you have, which is like a smartphone that this website is going to send a code to. You'll enter the code in, and then that shows that you are, in fact, who you say you are. So those types of things are elements people can just use every day to really help themselves.
Yeah, that's great. Detective, what other suggestions are you giving the good citizens of Ottawa County and elsewhere about protecting themselves?
You can protect yourselves primarily through prevention. Something that's kind of universal across all of the scams is the sense of urgency. Something's got to happen now. It needs to be taken care of now. I need money now. What I always tell people is pause, take a break, and evaluate and think about what you're being asked of. Do you have an Amazon account? Because if you don't, the Amazon account that they say is compromised may not be true. Do you have an Apple account? Or, they're saying yours is compromised, but you have an Android phone. Just little things to evaluate the information and never ever click on the links or use the phone numbers in the email. Apple, Amazon, all of their support phone numbers are readily available on Google that you can look up and call and verify. Secondly, the one thing that I cannot express enough is do not send cash in the mail. Do not cash checks that are sent to you. If you're contacted, the checks mainly come from being contacted through a text message or Facebook from somebody you don't know that's now befriended you and sent you money in the mail. Don't ever cash those checks and send money. You essentially become part of the money laundering process when you do that. And it's something you can get in trouble for down the road if you continue to do it after you've been told to stop, something along those lines. So you want to just keep yourself protected, like Jessie said, making sure that your passwords are up to date, and don't ever allow someone access to your computer. If they ask you to click on a program to allow them access, that's a scam.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think some of those other, like you were touching on, like if they're looking for cash or, ultimate, like pay us in iTunes gift cards or, those kind of things are all big red flags. And any other suggestions on how we can protect ourselves?
I always say, if you're unsure, don't do it.
Yeah.
I would also say, just, at the same time, we talk a lot about like we're talking about a lot of the bad elements of technology. And there are a lot of really great benefits, and technology has served as an incredible tool, especially in the last couple of years, to keep people connected. I mean, we're using this webinar right now as a fantastic vehicle to keep people engaged and informed. So I would say, in addition to just being super aware, continue to use your devices and become more familiar with them and how they function and the different elements of everything that you use, because then when something weird does pop up, you're going to be more aware of it. It's going to seem out of the ordinary to you. The more confident you are in using technology, you have a better ability to point out something when it's not right. So it's kind of that fine balance between the two areas of things. Don't go out and throw your phone into Lake Michigan because you're done with technology now. Just be more aware and have a heightened sense of kind of what's normal.
Yeah, that's great. Great advice. And I know, I think when we talked on Monday, Detective Monger mentioned some websites that we really can take a look at, official websites, including the FTC website to talk about some of the scams that are happening, the FBI's website, and then AARP's website. AARP has a section where you can type in your zip code and you can see what scams have been happening in your area. So when we post this, we will post these in the notes, these links that will take you right to those websites. Jessie was so great to pull those out for us. So when we email this webinar out and when we post it on our website, we will have those links as just a resource. So before I open it up to question and answer, any final thoughts, Detective or Jessie?
No, other than I agree, continue to use your devices, get real familiar with them. So when something does pop up, you'll question it and just be aware. The biggest thing we can be is aware of what's going on around us and making sure that,
Great.
researching.
Well, good. Well, I mean, so fortunate to have both of you on this webinar today. So I'm going to open it up to any questions that people might have that are watching today. And just if you have something, let us know. I'm not seeing anything yet, but this is, Detective, how much of your time over in Ottawa County, how much of your time is spent on these kind of things?
I would say 75% of my cases are these types of complaints that are coming in, the scams with the gift cards, the email phishing, something else. that I didn't mention earlier, catfishing, which is, the social media contacts. You think you're communicating with one person, but it's really totally somebody else. And that's usually when the gift cards and the check cashing and sending cash in the mail tend to come into play. And a lot of that money is unrecoverable. Once it's gone, it's gone. We can't get it back.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think before we started everything, you had talked about the role banks are playing right now. Can you talk a little bit about that while we wait for questions here?
Sure. So banks and financial institutions primarily are now required to report suspicious financial activity that they feel maybe a vulnerable older adult is being exploited financially, whether that's from a grandson wanting grandma to take out $50,000 or large wire transfers or financial activity that's outside of a person's normal financial behavior. And that's all in response to a lot of the gift cards, a lot of the phishing emails where money needs to be sent. So it's called the Financial Exploitation Protection Act that went into effect back in January of 2021. So that's why you'll find that the banks may be asking you more questions. If you go in and want $20,000 cash, they may ask you more questions than they used to. It may be legitimate on your part, but they're probably going to ask why.
Yeah, great. One of the questions that came through here, if I suspect that I've been scammed, who do I contact?
I would contact the bank.
Detective. Yeah.
I would contact the bank, and then I would file a police report. Especially if it's fraudulent, debit card transactions, those kinds of things, the banks may be able to reverse some of those disputes, but you'll need a police report as well.
Yeah, good. Another question here, how do I check if something I receive is legitimate?
Yeah, so if that something is like an email, one of the things that you can look for as far as it being legitimate is always look at the email address that it came from, because if it's, so oftentimes we'll see, and it comes from organizations that would seem very normal and familiar to you, Comcast, for example. But look at the email. It will come, if it's coming from Comcast, it'll be comcast.net. But it won't be at gmail.com. That organization has their own domain. They would never use a public domain like Gmail or Yahoo. So that's, right off the bat, something that you can right away look for. And if it is not from the reputable source, just delete it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's great. Maybe this is for the detective. What is the most sophisticated scam you've run across?
The most sophisticated we get are the cryptocurrencies complaints where you've responded to a phishing email and they want you to make a payment through cryptocurrency, which is that virtual currency, Bitcoin, Ethereum, Stellar Lumen, and they mainly have you withdraw cash, go down to Lake Michigan Sports Bar in Grand Rapids. That's a good example that has ATM kiosks. And then you essentially purchase that Bitcoin and send it off. The likelihood of us tracking that to an individual person is very unlikely. We usually will see which wallet it went to, and you could spend two days talking about cryptocurrency, but you can see where it went to, and then it gets divided off, and most of the time it's leaving the United States. And our ability to recover that is not easy.
Yeah. This is a great follow-up question to that then. Do you ever catch the perpetrators, and what kind of information do you need from us to help you with that? And finally, are they often in other countries?
Yes, often in other countries.
Okay.
Yeah. Often they're in other countries, and usually who we catch is who you end up sending money to. So if you purchase gift cards and then provide the information to the person who contacted you, we can determine who validated and registered that card, and then we're able to see where the card was redeemed and used. And so then we make contact with that person who usually is not the initial perpetrator. They're a layer within the initial scam. So then we make contact with that person and says, oh, well, I'm communicating with this person who needed money for that. And they're probably, 2 or 3 in the line of 12 or 13 people. And so it's pretty rare for us to actually catch the initial perpetrator. And if we do get somebody identified, yes, that's usually outside of the United States.
There is a question I just saw here in the chat because I wasn't monitoring that. I don't know if this is a question, maybe Jessie, maybe you can answer this. And if not, maybe the detective. If I receive a text from my niece, which was really not from her, does that mean that the perpetrator has access to the information on her computer?
With that one, I guess if it's a text message via phone, it's kind of hard to tell. Nowadays with, clouded information, it's hard to kind of say what all they might have access to. But certainly, if you're getting contacted by, your niece's phone number, but it's not her, I would definitely make sure that you make validated contact with her and have her check into her information. Because with that, it's hard to tell potentially. But I don't know, Detective Monger, maybe you have a better sense of that.
I think if it's a text message, there is something called spoofing, which, for a minimal fee, you can buy programs online that will allow you to hide your phone number, or essentially you're calling from your phone number, but what pops up on your caller ID is something else. And it's possible that maybe her niece was compromised at some point, or at least the phone number was. It doesn't necessarily mean that the computer was. And I agree with Jessie, those can be, if that's what you think it is, you can always ask validating questions that only the niece would know to determine who you're speaking with. But yeah, it's a number of things that can happen. Primary one we see is the spoofing of numbers, so that you can hide, the true person who's calling.
Yeah.
And I think the spoofing, that brings up a really good point. If we kind of look back to talking about, tax time and Medicare time, they can utilize government agencies as well in those names. So sometimes if somebody's calling you saying they're from the Social Security Administration, your caller ID could say, in fact, that they are from the Social Security Administration. But yeah, don't rely on that component of information to assure you that it is in fact that group. There's all these other factors that we've talked about that kind of let that be your guide as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I think what you were saying, Detective, is IRS is probably not going to call you to tell you they're coming to your house to arrest you.
Nope.
All right. Well, I don't see any other questions. So I, again, want to thank our wonderful panel, Jessie Riley, the Resident Technology Manager here at Holland Home, and Detective Joe Monger of the Ottawa County Sheriff's Department. Thank you both so much. I think this has been informative. Look for those links that we will include in the notes of this webinar, and also in the email that we send out. There'll be links that you can use. And until next time, we wish you a very great day. Take care.